Evening and welcome to Transition Talks Tuesdays, the fall of 2024, heading into the month of December edition of Transition Talks Tuesdays. We are here to learn more about transition, and this is brought to you in partnership with the three Autism Society affiliates of Wisconsin, along with Children's Resource Center South, and we're very thankful to them for their partnership. Tonight, we're going to be talking about ready to work, finding and keeping a job with help from DVR, the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And Sarah, you should be proud of me because I actually remember that it's division and not department. I always get department and division messed up. So if any of y'all do that, it's okay. A lot of people do that. So we're going to talk about how students can and should connect with DVR while they're still in school to increase their possibilities of employment when they're out of school and as they move into adulthood, and how DVR can work to help support the families and that youth in finding and keeping employment. So with that, I'm just going to turn it on over to Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Keene, and I am a program and policy analyst in the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And I am the policy analyst that has the specific emphasis on transition. So I'm here to talk to you about that tonight. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. Great. And Tim, can you let me know if it's presenting correctly?
We now have the presentation view. Thanks, Sarah. Looks great.
Great. All right. Well, like Tim said, it is a pretty small group. So if anybody has questions as I move through the slides, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask me the question, or you can wait until the end. I'm totally flexible. It completely is up to your comfort level of asking questions. So let's dive in. So the first slide is what is DVR? And DVR is the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. It is a Wisconsin state agency. We are under the umbrella of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, or DWD, and we develop occupational talent of individual with disabilities. We are a state and federal funded program. We are about 80% federal funding with about 20% state GPR match. And our mission is to assist individuals with disabilities in obtaining, maintaining, or improving competitive integrated employment. So in order to become part of the DVR program, you do have to go through a referral and application process. And since we're really focusing on transition tonight, I'm going to speak specifically for the student population. So we encourage students with disabilities that are in high school to apply for DVR at least 2 years before you're exiting high school. So for some students, that'll mean around age 18 if they are planning to graduate at 21, or it might be 16 if they're planning to graduate around the time that they are 18. And if you are under the age of 18 and you do have a guardian, the legal guardian must sign all documents in order to participate in the program. We do have a referral and application process that can be done either online, by mail, or in person. And I will be sharing that online referral link as we move through the presentation. So who is eligible? To be eligible for DVR, you do have to have a documented disability. So that's either a medical or a psychological disability, and that disability must present a barrier for you to work. So if those things are true, then you would be eligible for DVR services. So as you go through the process, DVR staff will work with you to gather any written documentation, sign any kinds of releases of information that you might need, and then schedule a time to sit down and talk to you about what your disability issues are and your potential needs for DVR services. We do use existing documentation as much as we possibly can. So if your school has any documentation as part of the IEP or 504 process, we can use that. If the student is involved in any sort of long-term support programs and they've used a functional screen to access those programs, we can use functional screen data. Or if you just personally have any previous medical records, we can use those as well. If you don't have any of those, we definitely can pay for any additional assessments that you may need in order for you to go through the eligibility process. We also have a little bit separate component only specifically for students called potentially eligible for DVR. What that means is that you would fill out an actual paper application that talks about some disability information. You do have to have it signed by your parent if you're under the age of 18 or have a guardian. And then you'll fill out the form and your school staff will actually sign the form. The school signing the form really is the documentation that DVR needs to say that you do have a disability. So it's a little bit of a different eligibility process than it is if you're going for full DVR services. The difference is that you can only receive pre-employment transition services as a potentially eligible consumer. So that does limit the services that you can receive. And I will talk to you a little bit about what pre-employment transition services all encompass. These really are intended to be light touch. You do not develop a plan with us. They really are kind of a touch and go as you need them. So maybe when you're working with your school special ed teacher, they may know that DVR has a very specific service that might be great for the student in the place that they are in transition and sign you up for that specific class through this potentially eligible option. But we do eventually strongly encourage our students that come in through this process to go through the full eligibility process so you can have access to the full array of services for the entire time that you need them. So we are required to have an order of selection. So what exactly does that mean? Basically, it is an acronym for a wait list. So by federal law, DVR must serve those with the most significant disabilities first. So if there ever is a time where DVR either doesn't have enough staff to provide services statewide or doesn't have enough funding to provide services statewide, we will go into an order of selection. So an order of selection evaluates how a person's disability affects 7 different areas that are related to work. And those, I'm not going to read them for you, but they are on the screen. I did think I heard somebody potentially unmute. Was there a question? Nope, maybe somebody just forgot to unmute or hit the button accidentally. No biggie. But anyway, the order of selection is done when you go through eligibility. And so, like I said, if DVR does go into a waitlist status, then we use that order of selection to determine who gets services first. So what are some key practices for transition? We really do encourage student and families to invite DVR to your IEP meetings and or allow DVR to provide technical assistance to students who think they may potentially be interested in DVR. So you can invite your DVR counselor to a meeting prior to ever filling out a referral online. And it could really be for the opportunity to learn about what does DVR entail, what would my responsibilities be as a student involved, what is the array of services that DVR can provide. So we can do that even before a family and student are ready to fully engage with DVR. And we really encourage that meeting to happen early on with the student while they're in high school. And then we do, as counselors, schedule and attend regular meetings with the high school. So our best practice is for our counselors to set up regular meetings so that students and staff are familiar with who their DVR counselor is and to make it easy to access those services once you're ready. So I mentioned that we were going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into pre-employment transition services. So it is required by law that DVR work with the local school districts to provide pre-employment transition services in a coordinated way. So there are 5 categories of pre-ETs, which is kind of what I'm going to call them from here on out. And those 5 categories are job exploration counseling, work-based learning, counseling on comprehensive transition or post-secondary educational program enrollment opportunities, work-based readiness training to develop social and independent living skills, and instruction on self-advocacy. So these are the core areas that I talked about. If you're a potentially eligible student, they are also those same services that you can get as a full DVR consumer. And if you're a person that already has an IEP and you're working with your school, hopefully you have heard of this term before, because like I said, we are required to provide them your PTP or post-secondary transition plan as part of your IEP must include pre-employment transition services by law. So hopefully you guys have heard of these categories of services. We do try to braid our funding so that we can provide these services to students in a coordinated way with our local schools. So I mentioned an IPE or a individualized plan for employment. And that is not to be confused with an IEP, which is an individualized education program that you get through special ed at school. So any individual that goes through eligibility and OOS has an opportunity to meet with their counselor to develop their individualized plan for employment or IPE. So basically that plan is going to include all the services that you need in order to reach your employment goal. If you are a student, your employment goal can be a little bit broader than a very specific goal that is required if you're above the age of 21. So the reason that the law allows us to do that is because we know that students are really in a discovery phase while they're in high school and may use these years to do some of that job exploration. And so a student may put down a goal to be working in the area of, let's say that they're interested in the medical field, right? So they can put that down, and then we may create some work experiences in the community for them to actually, have an experience in those fields. And then they might decide, that's not really for me. Or they may put down that they are very interested in working in manufacturing or the trades. And so we use those broad goals to, like I said, to do that employment discovery to eventually sharpen that to a very specific goal. And it's important for me to mention that the end goal for DVR is always competitive integrated employment. So we don't provide any services that would lead you to sheltered work or enclave work, which you would work in a group of people with individuals with disabilities. It really is only competitive integrated employment. And so what is the definition of that? That means that the individual is working full or part-time, earning at least minimum wage. So currently in Wisconsin, that's $7.25 an hour, hopefully higher than that, depending on the employment. The job must offer wages and benefits that are similar to those earned by individuals without disabilities that are performing the same work. So we certainly don't want to be paying people with disabilities less to do the same work that someone without a disability is doing. The job should provide equal access to advancement opportunities, just like anyone else. Typically, these jobs are found in the community, although for a lot of us now, we might be working from home. And if the job means that you're working from home as a person without a disability, that meets the definition. And that you are conducting business where an employee with a disability interacts with both with people with and without disabilities. Again, I often get the question about what about somebody that is self-employed and maybe they're not working with anybody at all? Does that still meet the definition? And the answer is yes, because there are many people without disabilities that are also self-employed. We just want to make sure that when you are in an opportunity where everybody else that does this job is sitting around people with or without disabilities, that you have the same opportunity. So it's important to mention that DVR really is designed to be a short-term program. So we come in, we develop the plan, we get your services, hopefully we find you an employment opportunity. You have been hired as a permanent employee at this place of employment, and then we will follow you and continue to provide you services for 90 days after you've started that job. And that is at least 90 days. Some people take a little bit longer to be considered stable on the job, and so we can follow you a little bit longer, but really it is a minimum of 90 days. DVR also must collect wage documentation once we know that you're solid in the job, you've received all the services in your plan, and you have jointly agreed to close your case. So it's important that we get that wage documentation because we do have to report that to our Federal Rehabilitation Services Administration. If you are a consumer that is in supported or customized employment, which means that you might need more individualized supports to do your job, and you are connected to a long-term support program like Family Care or IRIS, that 90-day time frame begins after we have transitioned you into the long-term support program to ensure that continuity of services for your supports. So there isn't that abrupt stop when you're moving from the DVR program over to the supports from your long-term care provider. So it's just a little bit different. And the reason for that is to ensure that you have the supports that you need when you transition. And then if you close your case and something happens with your disability and you're off work again and you need our help, or you're at risk of losing your job and you need our help, you definitely can reapply for services at any time. There is no upper age limit. So, I mean, we have consumers that are well into their 60s, 70s that still come back to us and need DVR services. And so you can reapply at any time. Here I provided you some transition resources. So the first one is a link to the Statewide Transition Action and Resource Team, or START. And that is a team of DVR counselors that have a transition caseload. In DVR, we are a statewide program. We are divided into 11 workforce development areas across the state. And so the START team has a representative from each one of those workforce development areas. So there's a list of those there. We also have a list of DVR transition services on our webpage. So that link takes you there. The third one is the DVR school liaison list. So there is a DVR licensed counselor that is assigned to every public school in the state. And so if you're wondering, my student goes to, for example, Lodi High School, how I find out who my counselor is I would go to this link. It will pull up the list of all public high schools in the state. I would scroll down and find Lodi. Then you would find the name of the counselor and their email and phone number. So we try to keep this list as up to date as we possibly can. There is a note at the top of the liaison link that if you do not, or the liaison list, that if you do not find your school there, or if you contact the person and for some reason the list hasn't been updated as it should have been, there is another email for you to send a message to in order to find out who that person is. And then we also link the Transition Action Guide. And the Transition Action Guide is a web-based manual that really is designed to help the student and family navigate the transition process, because it talks about what responsibilities and expectations there are for all of the partners around the student as they move through the transition process. So it answers a lot of questions about funding and braiding services and pre-employment transition services and what that means. So there's a lot of information in the transition action guide, and it's meant to help when you're working in a team to figure out what everyone's role is. So that is my presentation. And I am going to open it up for questions now. I'm going to stop sharing so I can answer while you guys can see my face. There we go.
Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much, Sarah. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate that. I'll give people a moment to get their thoughts. And again, if you've been here before, don't worry about getting down every single link in the chat or off the PowerPoint. We will send out a copy of the PowerPoint along with a resource sheet, which is really helpful. So one of the questions I do have, Sarah, is that we know that not everything works perfectly in the state of
Yes.
Wisconsin,
Unfortunately, yes.
unfortunately.
Yes.
And sometimes families may find it hard to work with their school and DVR at the same time.
Hmm.
If it's students in high school, can the family reach out to DVR and for
Absolutely.
services, or does it have to go through the school?
It absolutely does not have to go through the school. It really is, you can go through the online referral and connect with DVR without starting the process by inviting the DVR counselor to your IEP meeting. But it would be the responsibility of the DVR counselor, though, to ask you questions like, do you have an IEP? Is it possible for me to be invited so that we can really coordinate services to best serve you in order to reach your goal? So it really is in your best interest to have both DVR and the school work together, but yeah, it's not a requirement by any means. Good question, Tim.
Please feel free to put your questions in the chat and I can ask them for you, or feel free to unmute. And we will, Sarah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I have similar questions, but actually opposite. So, Sarah, I don't know, do you oversee all of the DVR counselors reps? Are you involved in any of that? Because as a school, I sit in lots of meetings, hear a lot of things along the lines of, we'll come to your IEP meeting and we'll do X, Y, and Z. And I sit in a lot of county meetings, and in my county in particular, that doesn't happen for the entire county. Our reps don't come. We can't get past the online application with most of our students. Um, but I do feel like some of the districts served by DVR, those schools have positive feedback, whereas
Mm-hmm.
all the schools in my county do not. And we're really trying to figure out what the disconnect in our county is and why things are not working and it's not positive and we aren't getting very far. And if as a county we need to do something, or like who could we talk to kind of try and make our county a positive experience like some of these other counties are having, because it does get frustrating as a teacher to sit in meetings and a parent will come with,
Bet.
look at this great thing, look at this
Yeah,
great
I listened to this
opportunity.
presentation. Yeah,
Yes, like
I
they
know.
have
Like,
all
yeah,
these
that's
things we
not what
can
I
do, and
mean.
it's like, I know they do. It does sound great, and it's like they'll bring these things. I want my kid to do this, and line one is talk to your DVR rep, and I'm like, oh, and that's where the
The
everything
disconnect
ends.
happens. Yep.
So I don't know. Like, do you have suggestions for
Sure,
schools in our
I do.
county? Someone to talk to? Anything?
Absolutely, I do. So
Okay.
I don't actually supervise any of the field staff for DVR. However,
Okay.
because I'm located in our central senior leadership team, I do have the ability to kind of take in when there are concerns from the field and make sure that those concerns get answered. So what I would encourage you to do is to, and maybe Tim can throw this in the chat, we can put in the DVR directory. And if you can find your director for your county, that would be the first step that I would make. I would call or email the director and let them know that, hey, my DVR liaison on the school liaison list is non-responsive. We haven't been able to get them to come to an IEP meeting. In fact, they haven't done what is considered a best practice to do introductions at the beginning of the school year. So that would be a way that I would suggest you to troubleshoot. Again, if you don't have success in doing that, there is an opportunity to send an email directly to me, and I can go ahead and do some of that outreach for you. So
Okay.
my contact information is at the end of the presentation, as well as on the bottom of the resource sheet that we're going to share. And so that is how I would encourage you to troubleshoot some of those issues.
Okay, because I do know a different district has actually already done what you've suggested. So
Yep.
we really are kind of just like, what do we do? Yeah,
Yep.
I see Tim's message here. And
Good.
yes, that
Yeah.
person has been talked to right on the top. So
So you've spoken with
but-
Susan Chandek, is that what you're saying?
somebody in a different district has. So
Okay.
like
Yep,
we
and
as a
like-
district are trying to figure out if like are all of us doing something wrong in our
No,
county because we all have the
not
same
true.
complaints. So
Nope. I really do want to, if that is the case and you've reached out to Susan and you haven't had
Yeah.
success, I do encourage you to send me an email and I can follow up to see exactly what the issue is there, if they have a counselor vacancy, you know, but I can definitely make sure that your concerns are heard. So please, if you email me, list your school that you are in and the experience that you've had with reaching out and not having success. And I'd be more than happy to elevate it for you.
And then
Sorry
I do
to
have
hear that that's
one-
happening, but yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
I do have one
It's not okay,
follow-up.
but yeah.
I know I'm speaking for a group and we all kind of have similar but slightly different questions and concerns. So it'd be great to
Of
just
course.
connect with you, not through Zoom and taking up other people's time. But
Mhm.
my one other follow-up question is in regards to the process. Like step one is that online application.
Yep.
But then step two is that phone call from, is it UW Stout or UW Stevens Point?
Yep, it's a Stout Vocational Rehabilitation Institute. Yeah, that is happens for some, but some individual counselors, but if you don't have somebody coming to your school, that's probably not happening. Don't send the student through the SVRI referral process, eligibility process, and do it directly at the school. But go ahead, yes, it is SVRI.
That's the problem. All of our kids get sent directly to Stout, and a parent sees a phone number with an area code they don't know,
And
they
they
don't
don't get
answer the
it.
call, and
Yep,
then they get
we've
dropped.
heard that concern.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that my follow-up was like, is there ever going to be a discussion about maybe changing that or requiring counselors to do it or something along those lines? Because as a teacher, you think you did this great thing. You helped them apply online. You told them about this call, but then it doesn't happen. But the other part of the problem is like, we don't know it didn't happen. We reach out to the counselor. They're like, oh, let me look. Oh yeah, they didn't answer the call. We dropped them. Awesome.
Yep, that shouldn't
Can you
be
tell
happening
us
either.
before that happens?
Yeah, that shouldn't be happening either. Yes. So
Yeah.
if you could, and I do encourage you to put this stuff all in an email for me because I
Okay.
can definitely try to help with that process
Awesome.
because like I said, there is an option for the counselor to do it right there when they're at the school.
Mhm.
They don't have to send it through SVRI. We've heard that that's a real problem for families. And so the more that I can hear that, the more I can try to make a change definitely on the student side of things for VR. So it's important that I hear
Yeah.
that. So please include that information.
Awesome. Yeah, I can say in 17 years, I literally had to practically kidnap my counselor to get her to do one in person in 17 years. So,
Yep, that's a
okay,
problem.
I will email you and I appreciate
Yep.
so much you
Have you had
listening
any?
in.
Yes, absolutely. Have you had any experience with the supervisor that's listed in the chat?
So I did not, as a director at a different district does though. And then we
Okay.
are all in like the county CCOT together and we talk about
Okay,
that
so you're
stuff.
sharing.
So,
Well, I'm
yeah.
glad you're all participating in the
Yes.
county CCOTs. That's very
We
much
are. We
encouraged.
definitely
and that's
are.
great. That's
So.
awesome. And I'm probably, and what I'm hearing is you're probably not getting the DVR person to come to your CCOT either.
Yeah.
Maybe in some areas or not in others.
They do. Sometimes they show up and we're kind of like, can you give us some data? And then we got to get back to you. Okay, this is 3 months, 4 months in a row now. So, yeah, okay.
Yep.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate you answering my questions. I will send you an
Yes.
email so
Great.
that I don't
And
take up everyone else's time.
It's wonderful that you were able to join tonight because you definitely have a voice that we need to hear. So thank you. Thank you for your
Yeah.
questions. They're very good ones and your comments.
Thank you too. Appreciate it.
Other questions that might be out there while we have Sarah with us? I guess one thing that I always ask the people to clarify, Sarah, is that some families get confused because they get through the process of DVR and they get assigned a counselor, and then the next contact seems to be from Feist or ERI,
Mm,
and they're like, what,
sure.
did DVR drop me? Why is
Mm,
this organization contact me? Can you explain the relationship between those
absolutely.
employment
That's another
places
good
and DVR?
question. Yes. So when we develop the individualized plan for employment and there are services put on the plan, the next step in the process then is for the individual to choose a service provider in order to receive the service. So hopefully, again, this is how it's supposed to work, that the student and family are provided a list of service providers that can provide the specific service that the individual needs in order to reach their goal. And so, like Tim said, well, what if I end up hearing from somebody from ERI or Employment Resources Inc.? It could be that a work incentive benefits analysis was put on your plan and they're a service provider for that plan. So it really is important to understand that the majority of services that DVR does provide are done through the service provider network. The exception to that would be vocational guidance and counseling, because that is what we are here for. And we do also offer some in-house VR provided services. One of them is counseling, clearly vocational counseling and guidance. But we can do a few other things like some online assessments with you. We can practice some things like interviewing skills, things like that. But yes, you are, through an informed choice process, going to be selecting a service provider for the services on your plan. And then those service providers are then in contact with your DVR counselor about how things are going. There are requirements for service providers to provide reports, things like that, in order to make sure from a DVR perspective that they are following some technical specifications that are identified under that service, so that you get a consistent service from that provider. And hopefully quality service too.
Absolutely. As
Question.
people continue to think about their questions, I of course have a couple that I ask every time we have DVR on.
Yeah.
One of them is just to reiterate or clarify another point that I've had families confused about, is that when a young adult, so student, transferred, young adult, and they get a job placement and DVR helps them find that job, and maybe they work at that job for like 2 to 3 years, and it's during that time that they're still growing, they're still developing and learning what they really want to do and what they don't want to do, what they like and they
Mhm.
don't like. And so they have this competitive employment job, they have a disability, but they're finding out they really now want to do something else. That
Mhm.
maybe they want to go back to school, or maybe they want to go into training. Can they go back to DVR and
Absolutely.
reopen and say, okay,
Yep.
thank you so much for this, but now I'd like to take it a step further?
100%. Yep. And we strongly encourage individuals to do that if they need our services. Yep. And then we will be able to, if it hasn't been 10 years, we will be able to look back in our system and find your previous plan and all of the case notes, so that we can kind of expedite the step into a new plan. So yes, and we encourage people to come back as many times as they need our services. Good question. Oh, we have a hand raised.
All right, Michelle, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to be rude.
Oh,
Um,
all good.
so if a child does want to go back to school, or an adult of that age, I guess, do you help with that process as well, or how does that work?
If it was the question, if they're interested in going back to school, how does that
Cool.
work?
Yeah, do you help them to navigate that?
Yes, yep, we definitely do. And we do offer a service that's called the DVR training grant. It is a requirement for the individual to apply for federal financial aid through that process, because we then use the federal financial aid calculation to determine how much DVR can help. We do have an in-state public school preference for individuals that are interested in going back to school. However, if that individual chooses to not follow an in-state and or wants to go to a private school, we do have another way that we provide funding. It's just kind of capped at a specific dollar amount. So yeah, we may help you do a little bit of research around what school meets the training needs in order to reach your employment goal. We may hire a specific service provider to help you do that as well. But yes, there is the DVR training grant that does offer funds for individuals to return to school. With doing that, there are responsibilities for the students. For example, we do require that they provide us grades, right? We want to make sure that they're being successful in navigating through the program. We also very strongly encourage that student to connect to the Disability Student Services Office if they are going to a local technical college or university, because there can be some accommodations that schools can make for that individual as well. But yes, we do definitely help individuals to go back to school to reach their goal. And you can keep your plan open for the entire time that you are attending training. So if you're going to a 4-year program, you might have your plan open for 4 years. You are required to meet with your counselor every 30 days. And you and your counselor can determine what meet with them means. It could mean that we send an email back and forth and say things are good. Thank you, moving along. By the way, reminder, your transcripts are due to us with your report card from this semester. Please send it via email. Great. You may also decide that maybe you don't need to meet every 30 days, and so you set up a different plan. But there are responsibilities as a student to DVR if we are helping you with a training grant.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Was just looking to see if I could find that magical website that would give me the explanation of University Disability Resource Centers, so you didn't have to go to each individual school.
Oh,
But
I'll find that.
I haven't found that magic link yet. So if you can
It's
find that magic
brand
link,
new.
because I love that idea of partnering with DVR along with Disability Resource Center, along with, then they can possibly get access to different testing centers and support centers. And I mean, there's people out there that can help to navigate the weird world of technical college and higher education. And so I greatly encourage people to make sure that they're making those connections. And we did
I
have,
don't know how
just so
fast
people
I
know,
find
we
it.
did have somebody in talking about preparing for higher education. So you can go back to our Transition Talks Tuesdays page and feel free, if you missed that one, feel free to take a listen. She did a really great job.
Awesome.
Any other questions tonight?
Tim, I will get you the link for both the technical college and UW system schools.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And then I'll get that onto the
Absolutely.
resource sheet.
Great.
The last thing, as you guys are all exiting tonight, please feel free to click the link on your way out and open it up in another tab and give us a little bit of feedback so that we know what's working with Transition Talks Tuesdays and what we might want to do differently next year. Sarah, thank you so very much for spending your Tuesday night with us.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully we will see you back here next Tuesday when we will actually be talking about that post-secondary transition plan with people from the Wisconsin Transition Improvement Grant team. So come on back and we'll learn about how the PTP can kind of bring all this stuff together. So
Awesome.
hope to see you then. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Happy holidays to you all.
Bye-bye.